Welcome to Critical Junction, episode 16, part 2. I'm Mark.
Oh, I'm Luke.
I'm Jill.
So if you haven't listened to part 1 of our Ghost Hunters episode yet, we'll put up a link to that in the description so you can check it out.
You can also check it out if you'd like to.
You can check it out. That's, I don't know why I said that. Might want to reconsider what I said. Let's just keep going.
Something on your mind, Mark?
I don't know. Maybe. There might be. Anyway, we decided to do a second part to our Ghost Hunters episode because we realized we still have a lot to talk about. Luke, you brought up a couple of good points when we were discussing...
I'm surprised.
Yeah. You mentioned something about our skepticism and questioning what happened and whatnot. Do you want to maybe go over that a little bit?
Like that I was skeptical of our skepticism?
Yeah,
kind of thing?
yeah.
Right, yeah. No, we were coming out of there going, we found nothing. But at the same time, we hadn't reviewed any of this footage or anything like that. You know, we hadn't really actually taken a look at all the shit. I'm assuming after a process like that, there's a hell of a lot of stuff to go through. The audio recordings, the visual stuff, and you basically would have to meticulously go through that. I mean, I'm speaking from a scientific standpoint. You've got to be looking at this shit to try and find any sort of anomaly at all, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't actually take the time to do that. We were there for basically the recording of everything, but not the viewing of any of these recordings.
No, you're right. We definitely didn't do any analysis on any of the findings because we didn't have access to the data right away. But that's a fair assessment. Like we, without seeing any evidence or any of the anything gathered, how can we come to a conclusion one way or another, right? I would definitely be interested in seeing the results of the investigation, seeing the footage that was taken, maybe some of the recordings. There could be something there, there could not be.
Do you feel like you would have the interest to meticulously go through that footage? Because you would need the interest, right? Like these guys had the interest. We asked them questions, and it turns out, it seems that the people involved in the Paranormal Society have had some sort of a ghost experience. Mm-hmm. From the questions that we asked, many of them did, right? Like they saw a ghost when they were a kid or something like that. And so this is the thing that in my mind seems to be the thing that went, okay, now I need to find proof, and this is what has impassioned me with this sort of idea to do this kind of shit.
Yeah, well, I'd be coming at it from the other side of the spectrum. Like I would be going into it from the scientific perspective of, let's form a hypothesis, let's do some tests and see if we can corroborate anything. That I would have the interest in looking over that information from that perspective. 8 hours of footage. Let's see what there is, kind of thing. Scientific curiosity. Jill, what about you?
At the same time, I think that just the kind of stuff that was being recorded, people were watching the recordings as we were going. Right. The other instrumentation, like other than the CCTV camera setups that they had, people were looking at them real time. Mm-hmm. And staring at them. So I think most of what could be picked up would have been picked up in the moment.
So you think when one of these things happens, we notice it right away? You would notice something.
For the most part, I'm just saying that it's reasonable for us to say that the likelihood is that not much was picked up tonight. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not a complete sort of poo-pooing faith move to say nope, none of it was right. I'm just saying it's not an even.
So you're going from like a probabilistic.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, no, I think that's also fair. Just based on the odds of something being found are pretty slim, I would say.
Well, right, and there seemed to be a general idea that if this place is haunted, it's not very haunted.
Well, exactly. And if there's something that's haunting, and that, I guess it wants to interfere with the real world to some extent. Well, so why are they so bad at it that none of us actually noticed anything when we were there, available for them to interfere with us?
Were they running late? Maybe.
Yeah.
Oh crap! The guys are there.
It's like they forgot to show up to the meeting, so they're just going to send an email later on, and that email is basically finding shit on the recordings that the guys are going to look through later on.
Right, that's the memo. They may have sent a memo via a recording or something.
Yeah.
I think that's the best analogy I've heard about that.
Yeah. Do you feel like what was okay? So there's different different types of ghosts. I learned at this thing. Like there are some that are residual, so they would just be.
Yeah, that was a weird thing, eh?
So they would just be doing the things that they were doing, almost like I guess a residual ghost would be
like some kind of
like
echo,
an imprint or an echo,
right.
like a dimensional echo.
So I had a problem with the idea that I guess the interest isn't so much in contacting a residual ghost, because you're not actually contacting a residual ghost. You're possibly just witnessing maybe an anomaly of residualness. But the ones that we're trying to contact are not residual.
Yeah, because I think what they meant by residual is that it's, let's say, it's like a stain or an imprint on whatever that you're not really interested in. It's like looking at,
like an old CRT monitor there that has like the burn-in from...
Right, exactly. If you look at a video on pause for too long, it's just kind of there, so you're not really looking at anything.
If that TV was dedicated to Super Mario Brothers, and you just see the brick...
As I'm sure we've all done at some point.
Right, but in terms of a residual ghost, we could look at this, let's say, from a scientific standpoint of this isn't a spirit that we're seeing, but possibly some sort of something that we don't understand about time, and we're seeing something from the past. Like we could say maybe, like I've been thinking about this and sort of the psychology of being a ghost, you know? and I'm thinking, it would seem, first of all, what I can understand of ghost and being a ghost, there seems to be a problem. It's not as if we get happy ghosts. We get the effects of ghostness seems to be due to a negative. Does this seem to make sense?
Well, I think a lot of the common stories about ghosts is that they're, they have some kind of unfinished business, or they have something to settle, that kind of thing. I don't know where I was going with that, but I think...
But in a sense, it's due to some sort of a negative mental state, or something like that. I don't know if it's
necessarily negative. I don't know what to think. I don't know what the possible explanations would be for a haunting. Like I said, just traditional mythology or folklore would suggest that it's unfinished business or something.
Like an attachment.
An attachment to
At least
world.
one of the ghost hunters there was saying that they were definitely malevolent, that it's never a good thing. I think it was Daryl. He was saying that they're definitely not actual former people. They're some other kind of...
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because he said that it really depends on, it depends on your beliefs, right? So he was coming from an admittedly Christian perspective when he was talking about that.
Yep.
So according to his belief system, anything that would be present would have to be non-human, as he called it, because there's no room in the Bible or whatever for ghosts. When you die, you either go to heaven or hell.
But he also explicitly said that any of these things would definitely also be malevolent.
Yeah, they would be malevolent because they're non-human entities or whatever, right? So they have a malicious purpose in being here or whatever. And again, that's coming from his perspective as a Christian.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, what would a Hindu believe or whatever, or like a Muslim, what would their perspective be on a haunting?
Well, I think we kind of touched on that when they were mentioning jinns, and jinns apparently are completely evil as well. You don't get any you don't get any Robin Williams style jinns.
Right.
They're not cool. They're not cool blue singing songs kind of thing.
No, exactly.
They're just pretending they're kids just to get you roped in, and then they're going, surprise! I'm not 13-year-old little girl. I'm gonna rip your soul out and eat it.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
You're gonna get real bad acne.
Like if you look at the original mythology behind the jinn, they're not, like you said, they're not Robin Williams types of genies who are like, thanks for saving me, I'm gonna give you 3 wishes now. They're like evil spirits who are gonna fuck with you.
Yeah.
Right.
And I guess like a lot of the times during these investigations, I think that's the impression that I'm getting, is that the entities that they encounter are there to cause some kind of trouble or some kind of mischief. What do you guys think about that?
Well, the way that I interpret it now, so I guess I came into this, like I said, I was basically psychologically trying to imagine being a ghost, sort of thing, right? And so I was much more in this experience, hanging out with the Paranormal Society. Well, I was interested in talking to the sensitive, the medium. Like this is the stuff I was interested in, right? Like I wanted to go around and go like, okay, let's see what I can picture here. You know,
well,
what am I feeling in this room?
Let's talk about that for a second, because you spent a lot of time talking to the medium. So what were your impressions when you were talking to her?
In what sense?
Just anything in general, like because you spent a lot of time just wandering around with her. I think at one point.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, I tried to with each person, but yeah, you're right. I was particularly attracted to that thing. I was getting something out of that. Like I was enjoying that. Like for example, down in the room where what was it? It was the sealed up room, the room with the documents in it, with
the jail cell room,
the jail cell,
former jail cell.
Right. So I enjoyed our experience in there, and
with the
visuals,
dehumidifier.
yeah, the visuals that were coming to me with that dehumidifier and all that stuff, and in a sense, I came away from that room feeling haunted, like by the visuals that I saw that we discussed openly, like right, because they're saying things, and I don't know if it's what they're saying that's implanting these images in my mind, but we the three of us came out of there. I didn't get it on tape, but the three of us came out of there, not you, but me and the other two ladies that were there. And we saw the same. We seemed to see the same visuals of the same guy.
Right. You mentioned that at the closing of part one. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Just what
was that imagery?
What we saw, sort of thing. Yeah, we saw sort of a guy. I think the sensitive. I can't remember what was her name. Julie, I believe. Julie.
Like long greasy hair kind of thing.
Yeah, long greasy hair. This is the way I described him afterwards, and the other person there. What are the names of the people here? Because I never remember people's names.
We were down with
Shelby?
Julie and Shelby.
Shelby. Okay, right. So I remember when I said it, Shelby was like, oh, yes, I know what you're talking about. Like, yeah, I'm seeing that too, kind of thing. Like there was a sense of excitement, kind of thing, in the description. So yeah, I was kind of seeing like a greasy. Immediately, I sort of had images of Gibby Haynes from Butthole Surfers, like hair sweaty in front of his eyes, and Julie had described him as almost like he's like the Tasmanian devil going.
Yeah.
And so, saying all these things and the images that came to my mind, I could say I was haunted by those images.
Yeah.
And it's not to say I saw a ghost or anything like that.
No, but without wanting to be too dismissive, aren't those sort of like archetypal images for the concept of a prisoner?
Yeah, of madness.
From the 1800s.
Yeah.
Like...
Absolutely.
It was a jail cell, first of all. It wasn't a prison. So the guy could have been there just because he was drunk walking down the street, but he's actually like the mayor's assistant or something.
you're
there's
right,
no
right.
reason to believe that.
Yeah,
like,
you could just as easily be describing Sirius Black in the Prison of Azkaban.
Yeah, exactly. See,
but what
these are archetypes, right? These are motifs that are actually more predominant when you just think of the concept of a prisoner.
And I'm not saying that I wasn't influenced to see it or anything like that. All I'm saying is that I did see it, and that it did haunt me afterwards, in the sense that I continued to see it. Yeah. And so it made me...
you dwelled on it.
In a sense, I started thinking that a haunting or something like that is more like can be viewed more as like some sort of a stainage, like a mental... staining on the world sort of thing, that we can leave imprints with mental thoughts on matter,
but
in that sense, and
so is this staining happening like in a particular part of the universe, or is it happening on the land that the building is on, or is it like staining the walls of the building so that once you actually bulldoze the house, that erases the stain, or how does it?
What I mean is that, from what I can see in terms of looking into this world of paranormal, and I'm including like aliens, everything, monsters, all that shit. You know what I mean? Like in terms of the the stuff I've been researching on my own and stuff like that. There seems to be this idea that the mind can leave an imprint on matter. I'm calling it a stain sort of thing, in the sense that we could say attachment could be the thing that stains, or some sort of trouble. Like, in a sense, let's say the mind is flowing like water. As soon as it's not and it becomes a swamp, that's what I mean by a stain. It's the swamp that stains. It's the murkiness of the water. In that sense, it is the evil. It is bad in that sense. Bad in the sense that it's not flowing. It's something has stopped. Something has It's now murky water. It's like a swamp. I'm comparing it to, sort of thing, and that this itself can affect matter or leave some sort of an encoding or image or something on matter, sort of thing, right? That can affect us later on. And so I'm trying to view ghosts in a sense from a different perspective here, that they're not spirits, and we're not using that mythology.
Wouldn't
in my mind,
wouldn't that be specifically what they were distinguishing as the residual stuff rather than actual ghosts?
Right. Well, what I'm saying is that
you're talking just about the residual.
Yeah,
stuff.
I guess this would be residual sort of thing, but I think that it could be. You could simply just say that a consciousness can leave an imprint of consciousness that then takes on its own form, and this could be non-residual. You could say. You're saying that
you've been seeing stuff in actual scientific literature that's saying that consciousness can stain matter.
Yeah. Anything in science that we're seeing in terms of that is pretty lowbrow, bad sample, bad science kind of stuff.
Okay,
but we're still seeing it. Like, there's evidence of this stuff with scientific experiments. It's usually just not very redoable, and we're seeing a lot of problems with the science here.
Yeah.
Well, back in February of this year, Brian Cox mentioned that the Large Hadron Collider pretty much disproved the existence of ghosts, right? Because it violates the law of conservation of energy. So, just a quote from this article that I found: if we want some sort of pattern that carries information about our living cells to persist, then we must specify precisely what medium carries that pattern and how it interacts with the matter particles out of which our bodies are made. We must, in other words, invent an extension of the standard model of particle physics that has escaped detection at the Large Hadron Collider. That's almost inconceivable at the energy scales typical of the particle interactions in our bodies. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there I would think the idea of it being contained or matter, let's say something affecting matter that's from a mental place. I mean, it's still about finding that gem. It's not as if it's everywhere. It may just be here and there. It's like taking a picture of space and going, there was no UFO in that picture of space, so there's no UFOs. It really is still just a contained moment in time with very specific particles in a very controlled atmosphere. I mean,
so
I don't know.
You think he's overstepping by saying that this disproves?
Well, I think that any scientist going, I did this experiment and I saw nothing. So
because he measured what he measured, which wasn't necessarily what is actually what ghosts are. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, I think I don't know. To tell you the truth, I don't know. But I do think that scientists have a tendency to speak with quite a large amount of certainty when they find something and they go, this proves this. That's all there is to it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, we are...
I don't know if that's scientists per se that
I just mean...
I actually find the opposite, that non-scientists tend to speak with certainty.
You're right, we all do. We all do. I think
scientists are actually in a sense, they're different from the general public, that they tend to speak with a lot more kind of hedging language, and saying things like, so with the data that we have now, it suggests maybe this.
Right, and this would be a good scientist. But I just often find, and you're probably right.
And most people don't do any of that. Most people say, this is what it is. I heard it on
right.
See, no, I think you're right, Jill.
I didn't mean to be more critical to scientists than other people.
The issue is, and this comes back to when we were discussing science communication in one of our previous episodes, it's that the media picks up on really interesting sound bites.
Exactly.
They're not going to mention the part where the scientists say, well, the data that we've collected over this period would tend to indicate blah, blah, blah. The media picks up on the blah, blah, blah part.
Right.
Because that's the part people want to hear, and that's the part people want to tune into.
You're right.
Because it sounds interesting, right?
Right.
The reams of data that it took to come to that conclusion, no one wants to hear about the methodology in a science experiment unless you're a science nerd, They just want to hear drinking a glass of red wine a day will prevent cancer. You know, what the study actually might have said was that during this one anomalous reading, this is what that anomaly would tend to suggest. That's not what the study was about. It's a peripheral to what the actual study was conducted for, right? And that's what the media will glom onto.
Well, and in that sense, I think a lot of the gems of science that may be anomalies are usually just put on the back burner and not really discussed, because you do need that comparison. You do need it to reoccur and things like that. So until it does, I mean, I don't even know if anomalies are fairly documented and communicated. Probably not, right? Probably. So that when they do occur later on, we don't know that it's already occurred, you know, because it just hasn't been documented and held on to, because they just went, that must be a mistake, you know, that we found that. What was that?
Right.
So I think there's a problem. Well, yeah, there's a problem with everything, but there's a problem with science in that sense. It's like archaeology. You find something and it doesn't make sense. You go, okay, well, we're just going to put this wristwatch that we found that's 2 million years old. We're going to put that aside because that doesn't make any sense. Let's take a look at the pottery here. You know?
Well, let's discuss the issue.
Are there not cases of stuff like that? You know, in archaeology, like I've seen shit like that where they find something and they're like, a computer should not have existed at this time, and we don't understand what this is. Like, do you remember? Have you guys ever seen that?
I'm not aware of any actual.
Okay, this is another podcast, I guess then.
Yes.
But because they've found stuff, you know, that should not exist back, like.
Do you have any examples?
Well, it was basically a low functioning computer that they found.
Oh, you're talking about the Antikythera.
Yeah, what is this thing?
This
is just an
this
example.
thing that
I don't
apparently would map the cycles, like astrological kind of cycles. So you could tell from this little mechanical thing when an eclipse might happen, or when a full moon would happen, or this kind of stuff. I think this is what they determined you could track based on like the gears and the form, the sizes and the configuration of the gears that they saw in this box from like some kind of X-ray machine or something like that. Okay. But it's not actually a quote unquote computer, in the sense that there's no like modern electronics in it. It consists of technology that we know did exist in that era. So I don't really understand why it would be considered like some kind of unexplainable thing. It's wondrous because it's actually at the higher end of complexity for the technology of that era, but it's still of that era. And
I think we don't give enough credit to people of that era and their ingenuity.
Yeah, like, we talked about this in the Ancient Aliens episode.
Yeah. You're right. The math capacity of their brains back then.
Yeah, like they're still human. Like they were still capable.
Well, on
of
evolutionary timescales, like anything within the past 50,000 years is nothing.
Right.
Like, we were what we are back then, too, you know? And so
they're perfectly capable of
Don't
making
let me get
these
sidetracked because I had a stupid thought. Like, let's go back to something else.
Okay,
I have nothing to back up what I was saying, guys. I have nothing.
Let's talk about the issue of credibility for a second. So,
just to cap off what you were going for, though, I don't think it's actually happening in science that things that contradict the prevailing model or the current knowledge, things that contradict it or seem to contradict it are just set aside and ignored. I don't think that's happening.
So you don't think
I
they're
think
being
that
ignored?
you would have to lay out a case to prove that that's happening, because
in terms of science,
that.
In terms of science and the way it works, it would make sense that if you had some sort of anomaly, right, that would be the equivalent.
But that
of
anomaly
a gem.
is definitely cataloged and
so it's
included
cataloged
in part of the data.
Right.
It becomes
as
part of the
just
data
something
set.
that happened. And,
Right.
Yeah, this, we found this anomaly. Can't explain it yet. Further study is needed. That's usually the way they go about that kind of thing.
But it's not like it's swept under the rug.
Fine, scientists are okay, I guess.
Well, speaking of scientific studies, let's talk about the issue of credibility for a second. So, Do you think the reason why there's no serious scientific study on the issue of the paranormal that we know about, any mainstream scientific study on the issue, do you think it's because scientists who undertake that kind of thing would lose credibility amongst their peers? Do you think that's an issue?
It could.
It might be, but isn't there like sort of paranormal research labs in like Ivy League universities?
The few that I know of lost funding or shut down or wrapped up their investigations because
nothing was found.
Nothing was found.
Nothing conclusive was found.
Yeah,
but they went on for years.
Some of them did. Yeah, you're right. But do you think the issue of why they lost funding is because they weren't able to find anything, or because it wasn't a credible endeavor?
I mean, it very well could be a little column A, a little column B, right?
It could be.
Well, yeah. Thinking about our experience and the amount of work that went into what we saw these guys do, the Paranormal Society of Ottawa or whatever, like there's a hell of a lot to do. It takes a lot of time. And we can see how it could have been even more thorough, Yes. And
especially in hindsight right now.
It takes a lot of time, and in a sense, why would you do that? So you have to have the belief there in the first place, or you have to have some sort of driving passion to make you put that much time into it. You know what I mean?
Well, like I said at the beginning,
it could either be it could either be passion, or it could be sort of the sunk costs fallacy kind of thing,
right.
where we've already put this much time and money and effort into this. We need to keep going until we find something that we can that satisfies that part of our curiosity or our expectation.
Yeah. And like I said,
it might not even be passion necessarily.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning, I would go into this kind of thing not from the perspective of I believe and want to find something that backs up my belief. It's I'm genuinely scientifically curious to see if there's anything behind this.
But wait a second though, you do also want to believe though.
I may want to believe. Like I think it would be cool for something to change my mind.
Okay, yeah.
That's what I'd be looking for. Something that would challenge my expectations. I wouldn't be going into it believing that hauntings or ghosts are real, or that I'm going to find something. It's, can I find something that'll challenge my preconceived notions of the universe?
Right. But you also do, like, you have a very keen desire to find it. Like, you have the Mulder poster up in your office that says, I want to believe, because you do want to believe.
I would like to believe. Yeah. I want it to be real. I've said this before on like a bunch of different episodes. I would really want this kind of shit to be real, but so far nothing is. I've not been able to find any evidence to back that up. So yeah, I would be coming at it from that angle. Like, I'm genuinely curious. Let's see if we can find something.
Yeah.
Thus far, haven't.
The problem with belief and stuff like that is that you have to be open to it, or else you're in a sense possibly unable to identify it and see it.
Well, I think that's what sets a scientific investigation apart from a paranormal investigation. Is during a scientific investigation, you acknowledge your bias going into it, right? Like, if you're leaning towards a certain result from the beginning, you admit that, you're aware of it, you're consciously aware of it going into the experiment. And that's why they have things like double-blind studies and that kind of thing. It's just so that the observer can't influence the result. If you acknowledge your bias from the get-go, and if you put yourself outside of the experiment, the result should not be influenced by that bias. Whereas in a paranormal investigation, for the most part, people are going into it, like you said, believing that they're going to see something, believing in the paranormal from the beginning, and they're introducing that bias into that investigation, right?
Yeah.
Well, the guys that we were with, they were saying specifically that they acknowledged their biases and that they were actually not going in expecting to see something,
right?
But hoping to see something, or
like OPRI was really good about that. But there are still other investigating teams that go into it believing from the beginning. And I think some people, correct me if I'm wrong here, but some of the people we were with believed from the sensitive, for example. Like she went in there believing she had these visions and whatever, which.
So that's the thing. You've got to make the difference between paying lip service to the acknowledgement of those biases versus actually accounting for those biases in a way that you can actually mitigate them or reduce their influence on the way you're gathering data and stuff like that.
Yeah. I'd be really interested in seeing the full methodology that they use to come to their conclusions at the end of it. Like, how well documented is this kind of stuff? Do they have a full report that they fill out? Do they document the step-by-step process that they used to come to these conclusions?
I think that we could conclude, having seen what we saw, that it's probably not as well documented as you would like.
Sure.
And that
or controlled.
It may not be as controlled. Like, for example, the asking of questions. I was imagining that I was the ghost trying to answer, and I was quite confused. And I didn't know if I should knock or not, Like, I'm putting myself in the room, and I'm going, okay, if I were communicating, and...
So what types of questions are you talking about?
Well, I just mean that, you ask a yes/no question, but then you ask another yes/no question that may negate that question that you just asked. Like, just very simple things, like that. It was all very spontaneous and not controlled.
Ad hoc a little bit.
Right.
I was surprised, actually, that there wasn't a written script.
Like a standard set of questions.
Yeah.
But at the same time, though, there would be something lacking in the spontaneous. Like, the spontaneous leaves you open to... But you're right.
But you should at least be refining a process and then adjusting that process and procedure according to what works versus what doesn't work.
Because that's how you get...
And then that process just gets more and more refined.
Right.
Because that's how you get a repeatable result, right? If you have a set standard and you apply it to every investigation equally, then the results become repeatable at the end.
Yeah.
That's an experiment, right? That's a purely scientific investigation.
Yeah.
If you have the methodology down and you follow it to the letter every time you do this, without exception, then you get more scientifically accurate data, right? You get the questions that you want to ask these things, and you ask them to every single one in the same fashion, in the same order. That's how you become scientifically accurate.
Yeah, this makes sense. Yeah.
The ad hoc thing, while it's...
What are you guys talking about, ad hoc?
Ad hoc means kind of made up on the spot.
Oh, okay, I see. I didn't know that. Where does this term come from?
Like, learning a new term every episode now.
Really? You guys have mentioned this over and over again, and I've never caught on? I've said it every day to you for the past 2 months. What you're only catching on now? I don't know what you guys have.
But while the ad hoc set of questions might be more appropriate to this type of thing, I think it would help if they had a set standard of them.
Well, you should at least start from something.
Yeah.
And then of course you have the latitude to respond according to the circumstances that you actually encounter, right? And have to have some discretion there. But having a worked out, refined procedure doesn't negate that other part of it.
Like, for all we know, they could, and this may have been the set of questions that they always use, because we've only been on one of these investigations, right? But it did seem improvised in a lot of places.
Yeah.
Not to knock what they're doing, because they put in a lot of effort towards this.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. And we're just coming in going, we could put in more.
That's right.
But would we be willing to do it?
Right.
Possibly.
Possibly.
I wish that. So we're saying that they did a lot of ad hoc stuff, and I also think that there were some sort of common pitfalls that they would fall into, like confirmation bias and these kinds of things like that, and I wonder if they couldn't actually apply some kind of skeptical framework over top of their stuff to make it more rigorous.
Right.
And I'm thinking about like Carl Sagan's baloney detection kit. So he had like these. So there's he came up with like 9 things that you can think about to avoid
your checklist of things.
Yeah, sort of like a checklist.
All right. Have you got it there?
I've got it here. I'll read through. I'll read through most of it, I guess. Unless we can go through all 9 of them.
So we could see this as a checklist of ways we could possibly check the science of something while we're approaching something.
Yeah, and it's kind of informal. It's not like it's not necessarily what a PhD scientist does in the lab, but it's something that's actually usable by laymen in their everyday life, and that's kind of the point.
Kind of like a guide to skepticism and critical thinking.
Sure.
In a nutshell.
So
nuts hell.
Going right into it. So number 1, wherever possible, there must be independent confirmation of the facts. Number 2, encourage substantive debate on the evidence by knowledgeable proponents of all points of view. Do you guys want to like comment on each of these as we go along, or do you want me to read through?
Yeah, let's.
Okay, so for like that second one, I thought they were pretty good actually with that, with having some people with different perspectives on their team.
Like they saw that as a positive, and you recognized it right away. I feel like this guy's coming in with this guy's coming in with this, and this is what makes us a team. Right. Like there's definitely it was definitely like the team. It's all about the team here, kind of thing. Okay,
yeah, and also they like you could see it in their openness to having us there, and they know that we're like a skeptic, quote unquote, chat podcast.
Well, we tell
right?
ourselves skeptics. I remember us having the discussion in the car. I'm a skeptic in a different way that you guys are skeptics. Like in a sense, it's like being a skeptic is a what do you call it, a
spectrum? Or?
Spectrum. There's a spectrum of skepticism, but it's not even a spectrum. It's just different.
Okay.
Anyways,
there's just different kinds of skeptics, is what you're saying? Or?
Well, yeah, each person coming in with different thoughts and just trying to throw their thoughts on things and map things out in a sense, you know.
Let's go back to the first point with the independent verification of the results.
Independent confirmation of the facts.
Yeah, that one. So do you think there is independent confirmation of the facts with the investigation that we went to? Are we the independent confirmation now?
Well, I would suggest the team. I would suggest the instruments are the.
No, I think he's talking here about things like peer review and that kind of thing, like having the results looked at by someone who didn't do the experiment, so that you can confirm the findings.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
I haven't seen any type of formal report on like their research. You know, like there's no kind of structured thing with all of the data so that other people can look at it and say, okay, their conclusions here are reasonable and this kind of stuff. I think in order for that number 1 to be covered, they would have to be able to produce something that other people can review.
Right.
See, I'd be really interested in seeing that.
That would be great. Yeah,
it would be awesome.
Like you guys want to see the printout of the results.
Yeah, I want to see
not just a printout, but like
the full
like experiment. An actual analysis of it and seeing how they analyzed it and what conclusions they came to and how they came to those conclusions.
Right.
Full hypothesis, methodology, results, and conclusions.
Well, in general, more heads better. Like more heads better than one.
Right.
That's
the
right.
more heads, the better. Kind of thing.
That's right. Number 3, arguments from authority carry little weight. Authorities have made mistakes in the past. They will do so again in the future. Perhaps a better way to say it is that in science there are no authorities. At most, there are experts.
Yeah, I think we didn't see a lot of appeal to authority, if any, at all. So, like, they weren't like, well, this big ghost hunter dude says it has to be done this way, so that's what we're doing, or they say this, so that's the conclusion we're drawing. That didn't happen, right?
Yes, it was very open.
It was very open, yeah. So there was, like, that one, I think we can check that
out. At the same time, I find this can often be abused, where people dismiss authorities as basically all inclusion of authorities in any debate or something like that is automatically the fallacy of appeal to authority, whereas not all appeals to authority are a fallacy. Right. And this distinction here between authorities and experts, I think, is a little bit spurious. I think experts are authorities.
Well, I think it's also dated. this was written back in Carl Sagan's time when science was probably a little more threatened by authority. No,
I don't think it's old enough for that. At that
this
time,
isn't coming out of like Cold War stuff.
No, the appeal.
Well, I mean, it's Cold War because it's the 80s, I guess, but that's the end of the Cold War. And
well, the appeal to authority fallacy is kind of timeless. It predates Carl Sagan, so like he was just kind of adding that to his list of things because it makes for good skeptical thinking.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Avoiding that kind of any logical fallacy. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think people have kind of lost perspective of the degrees of credibility that people have on different subjects and domains, right?
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of that with the whole fake news thing.
Yeah, just because everybody's got an opinion on politics doesn't mean that everybody's opinion is equally valuable. Mm-hmm. Even though ostensibly we live in a democracy and and every vote counts equally.
No, not all opinions are
terrible
idea. It should, as it should.
Not all opinions are equally.
When you're talking about like political analysis and stuff like that, there are or political acumen and political expertise and ability to be a politician and to run a government, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There are people who are more suited to it than others. It's not like everybody is equally suited to it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not like I can go out there and talk about nuclear physics because I know nothing about the subject, right? So my opinion on nuclear physics is irrelevant in that kind of discussion.
Right. It's fun, but it's
irrelevant. Nuclear physics, it's fun.
Like I'm not gonna go to a symposium on nuclear physics and just be like,
I
disagree with the whole concept of fusion.
You might. Come on.
You totally did that.
He's totally doing that this weekend.
Fusion is stupid and we should move away from it. I do not believe in nuclear fusion. The sun is a lie.
So what's the next one on this list here?
Next one. Spin more than one hypothesis. If there's something to be explained, think of all the different ways in which it could be explained. Then think of tests by which you might systematically disprove each of the alternatives. What survives the hypothesis that resists disproof in this Darwinian selection among multiple working hypotheses has a much better chance of being the right answer than if you had simply run with the first idea that caught your fancy.
Right. So kind of like a Occam's razor kind of thing. Let's just look at what could possibly explain and see what we could develop and keep it simple.
The whole point of a scientific experiment is to try to disprove a hypothesis. And that's why they have multiple hypotheses, so you can, the one that remains wouldn't necessarily be the right one.
When it comes to like this kind of a scientific thing, like this paranormal thing, I mean, this whole looking for a gem, we're really just looking for this anomaly thing to happen.
Yeah, that's kind of like not a hypothesis, though, right?
No, it's looking for something and then trying to do something with something once we find something.
Yeah.
But we generally can't find anything.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of backwardness there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think they did a decent job of trying to put forward different hypotheses in certain respects. Like they admitted right away that 80% of the stuff that they find can be easily explainable.
Yeah.
But then again, I think they were a little bit lacking in coming up with a concrete set of hypotheses. Like they didn't have multiple different explanations for, we saw this, it could have been these things. Right? It was just, but it looks like this happened.
Well, yes, but they may very well have these due to experience in their mind,
sure.
Kind of thing. And this list of possibilities didn't come out at our faces or anything like that. But I mean, when we were looking for issues of why one of the cameras was picking up light and stuff, we found it, reflected off the lamp and shit like that,
sure. Yeah.
So I think what I'm saying is I think this list may exist due to their experience. We just weren't privy to it.
That's entirely possible.
It just makes sense that it would exist. And it may not be quite refined yet, but the more experience they have, the more refined it will become,
right.
I would think. But there is a problem in terms of the science of doing this sort of exploration in the sense that you're really you're looking for anything that doesn't fit in a sense, And it's quite difficult for it to become a science, to be, or it's quite difficult to find anything scientifically, I guess you could say, right?
Well, to get there, you have to apply the methodology,
Right.
Right.
For it to be reliable and for you to find something and be able to go, I have found something.
Yeah.
You have to have...
there has to be a method. There has to be like a rigorous method and approach to it. And using the scientific method is probably the best way to go about doing it, because it sets up these criteria that you need to follow in order for something to be considered valid.
Well, and I would
And
think...
short of that, even just without talking about the scientific method per se, just talking about formalizing processes. You know, like you're talking about spinning more than one hypothesis here in this tool of the baloney detection kit. You want to kind of catalog those hypotheses and refine them and make them as specific as possible. And I find this is kind of like how when you put thoughts in a journal or something like that, this kind of helps you to actually think through it and or get something useful out of your thoughts. Okay. You know what I mean?
It's like discussing your bad decisions with a friend so that you really implant it in your head that, yes, that's right, I shouldn't have done that. Talking to you now, I realize how stupid I was. You're totally right, I should...
That sort of thing, yeah. That's an example of formalizing in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Right, okay, yeah.
So, I don't know, that's...
No, I agree.
The next one here is try not to get overly attached to hypotheses just because it's yours, or to a hypothesis just because it's yours.
Mm-hmm. Which in this case would be very difficult, especially if you have beliefs. That is difficult.
Right.
And that's where I would suggest the team comes into play.
Right.
Because then you're seeing other perspectives and you're open and you're respectful with them and you're
That's
going,
right.
that is also a possibility. Yes. You know,
Yeah,
Daryl, you're right. You're on to something here.
Here we're talking about confirmation bias, like we were mentioning before, right? Like if you immediately go into it attached to your idea about this is why this is happening, it's not really the way to go.
You're gonna attach yourself to anything that seems to support your preconceived hypothesis
and dismiss everything else.
Yeah, you're going to dismiss everything else.
Discussing the things we've already discussed scientifically, using the instruments instantly puts a nice framework on everything. Like if we find something with a scientific instrument, then it did happen, and it does exist in that sense.
No, what you're saying is something happened.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Without putting any of the thought over it, using the instruments is first and foremost, and finding something with the instruments is the starting point, I would think, and then you have to be careful with all these.
Then you have a recording. You have something. Then,
but like with the recording stuff, one of the things that was really funny to me was in that jail room in the basement, we're all gathering around the dehumidifier, and we're all pointing our instruments at the dehumidifier corner, and then we're wondering at changes in readings and stuff, and when the dehumidifier stops, you see like a drop in temperature that's immediately correlated with it.
Yeah.
I mean,
like science is making sense here. The instruments are picking up on it.
And so I saw some kind of acknowledgement of the dehumidifier, and like that could be the dehumidifier, but could be the other thing.
Well, right, we're seeing people believing shit.
Yeah,
is what we're seeing. Yeah.
So again, there's
the want to believe.
There's the want to believe there that
causes some problems.
Yeah, and
I think there's causes problems.
I'm just saying there's a vulnerability there still.
Well,
despite the acknowledgments, there's still a vulnerability because of a lack of formalization.
Yeah.
A vulnerability to the confirmation bias stuff and
well, with the dehumidifier example, that's what I was saying. Like now you have a recording. Now you have to explain that or try to explain what that recording is. You just have something now. That something could be the dehumidifier shutting off and the temperature dropping immediately, because that's the result of what a dehumidifier does. Right?
Or rising because the fan is expelling warm air from the dehumidifier working.
Right. There's air circulating in this room, and now there's a disturbance in that airflow or whatever. You know, there's your something. There's an explanation for it. Let's try to debunk that hypothesis.
Right.
And formulate another one that could support the finding or disprove it or whatever, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, number 6. Quantify. If whatever it is you're explaining has some measure, some numerical quantity attached to it, you'll be much better able to discriminate among competing hypotheses.
Right.
So we've been talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
Number 7, if there's a chain of argument every link in the chain must work, including the premise, not just most of them.
That's a good one.
Number 8, Occam's razor. This convenient rule of thumb urges us, when faced with two hypotheses that explain data equally well, to choose the simpler. Number 9, ask whether the hypothesis can be, at least in principle, falsified.
And that's the problem with a lot of paranormal investigations, is the lack of falsifiability. Like, if you can't falsify a result, most people would just tend to dismiss the idea, because it's the same with the God argument, right? You can't disprove God, so it's not really a valid argument, you know?
Yep.
Well, that was easy. Okay.
And those were the baloney detection kit examples from Carl Sagan. I got those from the brainpickings.org website.
We'll put up a link to that in the description as well, because it's a very handy tool. I think we may have posted the kit at some point, or maybe I'm just thinking about my own Facebook. Either way, we'll post it up because it's quite useful.
Yeah. In any of our topics that we discuss on the podcast.
Yeah.
Carl Sagan. I love Kermie.
Kermie.
Yeah. Anything else?
Okay, well let's go back to that day when we were there at that
2 weeks ago.
At that place. Yeah, 2 weeks ago. What were you guys impressed with? What were you like? Any other thoughts that we haven't expressed here, sort of thing? Like, I'm still viewing the whole thing as a psychological thing. Like, I'm interested in the ability to record a paranormal event, and I would not deduce that it's a ghost or anything like that. I'd still be looking at psychology and this idea of the mind being able to affect matter. This is what I feel like, I guess the standpoint of belief that I'm coming from, or something like that. I'm not necessarily thinking of a life after death or anything like that, you know? But I suppose that is a life after death. This idea of being able to mentally impose something on matter and record it, kind of thing. Like, what I mean is that when we're doing these investigations and stuff like that, the psychology of the people involved may be affecting matter. If ghosts are possible, then what I'm saying is we can also be creating ghosts at the same time. So who knows what we're actually recording here?
But I don't think we create ghosts for each other in immeasurable. At least I haven't seen evidence for it yet.
Have you
That's
seen?
compelling to me.
I just mean that I think it's just.
He was Murph's ghost the whole time.
I just think it's as possible. You know what I mean?
But what you are bringing up suggests to me only that people can actually make ghosts for themselves. You can make a stain on your own mind, and often because we share a culture or we share a language and stuff like that, and we share a common kind of historical lore or mythology, we can actually the stains that we make on our mind can be similar and
crossover.
Well, and because we have similar stains on our minds, we consider it a same third outside staining. You know what I mean?
Well, I think I have. I think that I have.
When it's actually just two.
I have a completely different thought on what mind is, and that it's actually a collective mind, not mind. Like more like we're more like antennas than we are individual minds, kind of thing. We're antennas to mind, and mind is more not necessarily outside of us, but can be encapsulated inside of us.
Yeah, and that sounds way too romantic and woo-woo-y to me.
Yeah, no, and it is. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Claim is without evidence. Sorry.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Well, in my mind, I'm thinking my mind. Do you hear that? Right
yeah,
away.
There you
right
go.
away, I'm dissing myself. I just blew my own
contradicted
argument.
yourself.
In my mind.
You have
which
no
isn't my
credibility.
mind.
Sorry, Luke.
What I'm saying, I guess, is that I think it's possible we could be, like, for example, a ghost phenomenon can stem from a particular person's mind. Let's say we record a ghost. I wouldn't necessarily believe that that's something from, it's some sort of view into life after death. What I'm saying is I'd be more likely to believe that it's someone's psychic anomaly coming into play here, and that it could be just as easily tied down to someone's mind as it can be to matter. I don't even know what the fuck I'm talking about.
The thing that kind of bugs me or sticks in my mind is this kind of conflict that we get from people's personal experiences kind of being like really unquestionably compelling experiences that would have to lead them to that idea. You know, like Daryl talking about him coming away from one of their investigations and then having a bunch of bad stuff happen over the course of a few weeks until they did something to undo it or something like that.
And what I was getting at when I said that I was haunted after I came out of that room is that I could see that my mind could easily do that to myself.
Yeah.
Like, I was haunted, even though there was no ghost. I was still haunted by the image of that thing, and it was affecting my conscious life kind of thing, you know? Mm-hmm. It's like having a nightmare and living with that nightmare afterwards.
So you're not
attributing. It's going to affect
you're not necessarily attributing anything supernatural to that image. It's just something that psychologically affected
That's
you?
right. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah. But I'm also saying though that I do think it's just as possible that our mental conditions and what we put out there mentally can cause the equivalence of a haunting.
I'm not really sure I understand how.
Well, I don't understand how either, and I am suggesting that it's a model of science that we're not familiar with. That there are things lacking in our model of science that could explain. Like, I'm not saying it's outside of science. I'm just saying there may be parts of science that we don't know about, like in terms of viewing our model of the world and reality and stuff like that. So I'm just open to the idea that psychologically we can possibly affect matter psychologically, like that a ghost or a haunting, if we were to pick something up on instruments, could just as easily be coming from our own minds as it is coming from something that's been left there, like a spirit or something like that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Does this make any sense at all?
Well, I think I'm not able to agree with you on it, because I think you have like this idea that that the mind affects the outside matter or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not really getting that.
I see them as going hand in hand for sure. You know, they can affect each other. That they're synonymous with each other, and that we don't necessarily understand the rules of mind and matter and how melded together they are, sort of thing.
Sure.
You know.
But we also have different. We're also going off different ideas or preconceptions about how those things interact.
Yeah.
And mind just kind of comes from, the mind arising from matter, and so, matter affects my mind because my mind is like an emergent kind of thing that happens because of the matter in my body and in the environment and how it affects my body. And
yeah, I'm of the same opinion. Like this reminds me of the conversation we had about quantum physics during the Mandela Effect episode, and how Hugh Everett said that consciousness has zero effect on the universe or reality whatsoever. Like that you cannot influence. Like,
did we talk about The Secret?
Not yet. No, we didn't.
Because I think The Secret is actually
that positive thinking thing where you can, like, if you desire something, you can manifest it.
That's right.
Reality.
It's about like visualizing, right. And so
if that were accurate, if that were effective, then you'd have a lot more millionaires walking around, or people like just suddenly coming into all this good fortune because they visualized it and manifested that into reality.
Yeah, but I guess we're also talking about just because you're thinking something doesn't mean you're actually doing it. Like, you may think you're picturing something well, mm-hmm. but you may not be. What I mean is that some people may have more capacity with mind than other people do, Like, I'd be much more willing to trust like some sort of Buddhist monk that's practiced meditation for 30, 40 years and can really pinpoint his mind to be able to focus and think of something rather than,
mm-hmm.
What I mean is that our capacity of mind, we have very underdeveloped minds, if you ask me, you know what I mean?
I just
Like,
don't think
I
we
mean,
have...
the three of us here, we are retarded.
Granted.
Good, sure. Neuroscience hasn't come to the point where it's able to fully understand the brain yet. It's like the brain is one of the most mysterious organs in the human body, if not the most mysterious, because we don't understand it yet. However, most of the to go back on the example that you just mentioned about the Buddhist monk being able to meditate and focus on one object, that's an internal. So something happened. We lost the last half hour of our discussion because of a technical malfunction. Technical ghost.
It was a ghost.
Probably
we had
a
a
ghost.
ghost haunting our...
So,
Yeah. I think we're fucked, just like they said that us atheists would be fucked.
I think so too.
The ghosts are pissed off
I'm
we
not-
don't believe in them.
just so
and they're
you guys
like, God
know.
damn it, believe in us.
I'm
Fuck.
not part
what do
of
we
you.
have to do?
I'm not part of you atheists.
Right, that's right.
I'm a different...
That's
different
right.
kind
Yeah.
of
Sorry,
thing.
I didn't mean to.
So we were
Co-opt you.
we were talking about how you were talking about how you think the mind can influence matter, right?
Well, I'm open to that possibility that there are scientific models that do not yet exist on how I don't even know if I would call it thought, but on
How the mind and matter and the universe interact. Or
right, interact, yeah.
What their relationship is.
That's right. There's
direction of the
overlappings there that we don't know about, that are not yet documented. You know. And,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It seems to be a common theme in the paranormal world, like with aliens speaking telepathically, moving things with their minds, and all that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there seems to be this other level of mind. And if we're talking about the aliens, you know, often they will be described as, and they seem to be closer to God.
Mm-hmm.
Like they seem to be spiritual creatures, because that's how our brain explains how they're functioning, or the feeling that you're getting off of them, that sense of peace, that their mind is affecting our mind, you know, that type of thing. I don't know why I'm going on with the alien thing. I think I've been watching a lot of the paranormal stuff since we did this.
Yeah, and I think part of what was cut off earlier, I was just talking about how I think that the mind sort of affects our mood and our body, but the direction of that relationship is mostly that the world around us is affecting our mind,
Right.
and that when we're interacting, we communicate on a lot of subtle levels that aren't overt, and you know, we have moods and those affect like our demeanor and our little micro expressions and things like that, and we can kind of create a dynamic in a room with each other that kind of makes it so that we're like, you know, it doesn't feel very good in the room right now. You know, the energy is negative here, or
You're right, and that's
I'm thinking that's what it is.
And you could easily be like, when you go into one of these situations and you feel uncomfortable, you could just easily be picking up on someone else's discomfort and projecting that on your own experience.
Well,
or like with the God helmet thing, there might very well be electromagnetic fields that affect your mind. And so in a room, if there's a concentration of electromagnetic activity or something, it'll affect the brains of anyone who's in that geographical location, right?
Right.
And then people interpret that as a haunting.
Right.
But anyway, this is just a hypothesis.
Right. I guess I'm open to not necessarily saying it's a haunting or anything like that, but, you know, picking up anything with these instruments when we go out on one of these hunts or something like that, or when the Paranormal Society does this kind of shit, picking up anything, any anomaly, is a recording of something. And it's great.
It's great.
We're just looking for anything, you know, anything.
Sure.
Anything that's a freak incident kind of thing.
Yeah,
you know?
that's your whole gem.
Yeah, that's the gem.
The gem model that you're
it's
working
that
on.
Taking picture of the nighttime sky and catching that thing that doesn't fit, you know?
Yeah. And
that's what we're looking for.
I think that's like inherently vulnerable to confirmation bias.
Absolutely, and that's why this hasn't become hard science. It's because it's impossible for it to become a hard science, because it is based on finding a gem, you know?
Yeah, but at the same time, it could be brought closer to a hard science if there was a lot more formalizing going on, and like an effort to draw up a specific hypothesis and to say, look, I expect to get this result from this type of experimenting and gathering of data and measuring or measurement.
It would take time and focus.
Yeah, and then you go back
the instrumentation.
Then you go back and you refine the method and you create a different hypothesis that can explain the results, and you just keep going and refining the methodology until you get something that you can present as your final product.
As something.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time. Like, if you can imagine using those instruments and just setting up and filming nothing kind of thing, and then going back home and having like 6 different cameras of nothing to look through, and hours and hours of footage, and then you've got the audio to go through. Like, there's so much, and then look at all the instruments and what you recorded.
Yeah, like you have to be rigorous when it comes to any kind of investigation, right? Because like if you get lazy and miss something, then you kind of lose the value of the experiment, right? And that comes back to refining the method and just being more rigorous and seeing what you produce at the end.
So let's say we had seen a full-on apparition. Like, I'm thinking here that to see it with our own eyes would possibly be the best.
Sure.
The best thing.
Like we all saw a greenish, misty woman in a Victorian dress.
Yeah. And let's say scientifically we just see some extra magnetic activity or something like that. You know, something is captured, but not necessarily what we saw.
Yeah. The cameras didn't pick it up, and
what would this do? What would this do to your thoughts? You know, how would you guys be able to accept this kind of thing?
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm a little bit kind of harder on myself about in terms of what I believe and just how honest I am in terms of what I'm willing to believe and stuff like that, because there is like this dimension where a lot of the experiences that make people into believers, they're the kind that is like kind of an undeniable experience that, you know, I saw this, I experienced it, and I really can't with all of my education or whatever, I can't believe it's anything but what I'm saying it is, right? I can't believe it's anything but a ghost. That's what it was. I had this experience, and it has to be this kind of paranormal, specifically.
Right, which does seem to be the case with the people in this society here, this team of people. Like, they had experience.
That's it. All of them had something like that.
Seem to have had an experience.
Had something like that. Yeah. And to some extent, like there's nothing I can say against it. It's just that it's a problem for me that seems to be the only kind of experience that makes anyone into a believer, whereas everything else that goes into education or natural philosophy is stuff that we can actually kind of demonstrate to each other to teach each other about the truth of reality in the universe.
Right. You're saying this is where like, my models of the world are coming from.
Yeah. And it's weird that this one domain is not touchable by normal kind of science and learning and this kind of stuff. And you know, I can come up with 1.5 million kind of alternate explanations for why you might have the experience that you did, but ultimately that's not going to be compelling to you who had the experience and are like, well, you know, who am I going to believe? Some skeptic or my own eyes? You know,
I know what I saw, I know what I experienced, and that's now part of your reality. And how dare you challenge that?
Yeah, and to some extent, there's nothing I can say about that. You know,
it's hard to once someone has made up their mind about something, it's very difficult to change their mind about that thing.
Not just that. I'm saying that on some level, I don't have any more authority.
Right.
Like I don't have any more ground to stand on to say that was false.
Right.
You know, I mean,
Well, and in a sense, that's noble. Like, in a sense, you're saying I am skeptical only because I thus far am skeptical.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm saying if I had an experience like that, I might very well be a believer who's equally uncompelling to other skeptics. You know,
in terms of psychology, there is a matter of psychology that some people would not be able to take something in. Like, you would not even be able to believe it even if you saw it.
Right.
You know, like, your mind would block it out because it would just go, nope, that didn't happen. You know? Because that doesn't make sense to you, and you've got your world figured out, don't you?
Yeah.
And you'd be going, yes, brain, I did.
Like the story of the European colonists sailing toward the New World, and the natives not even being able to see the ships on the horizon.
Yeah. Until the witch doctor's basically going, there, do you see them now? You know, is this not the story? Like, basically he was able to go, no,
something
now you
like
see
that.
them.
Yeah, I'm not sure how true that story is, or whether it's just kind of an old.
Well, I was there in a past life, and so I remember.
But I find it a really interesting story, nonetheless.
Well, on that note, might be a good time to wrap it up. Hopefully, we can recover the first hour of this thing because we crashed and. Yeah, that sucked. Anyway,
Ghosts. It was Ghosts.
The ghosts ruined our episode.
Fucking ghosts.
Ghost of Gibby Haynes from Butthole Surfer.
It's funny, I don't believe in them, but they really piss me off.
Anyway, this has been Critical Junction episode 16, part 2. I'm Mark.
I am Luke.
And I'm Jill.
As always, thanks for listening, and we will catch you again next time.